Hi everyone, I'm Alistair Ben and you're watching Expressive Photography. You've joined me today about as far away from the mainland of Scotland as you can possibly get. I'm really out in the wilds on one of the most beautiful coasts in Britain. And we've just arrived this morning and I want to create a video talking about time. I think this is the most important superpower of landscape photography. It's very windy, so I'm not sure how the audio is going to go. So we'll try our best to record some audio. If not, we'll have to dub it in the studio. But let's talk about time, how to manage time, the consequences of time, and how we can bring more emotion and feeling and expressive intent into our landscape photography. So I've got myself a wide-angled scene here, and the overall impression is we have things that are close to the frame at the front, middle ground, background. I haven't got too much of the sky in. It's about 10:30 in the morning, and of course it's kind of bluish light, so the sky isn't so important, but what I'm wanting to focus on is the interaction between the surf and the rocks. So time is important whenever anything is moving. Here it's very obvious, we've got the water flowing around the rocks. It's super windy, so the clouds are moving through the sky. There is the foreground grasses that are blowing around. Basically anything in photography that moves. Now, we can either fight it or we can work with it. I've seen so many people trying to make photographs in incredibly windy conditions and freeze foregrounds, and when it's really almost impossible. So what I've got is here, I've got a wide-angled scene. I've got my case K9 filter system on here with a circular polarizer. That was my starting point. So let's look at the photographs that I've made using just the circular polarizer and a faster shutter speed, and then we'll start with that. So in the square format here, you can see I have foreground, middle ground, background. And what we're really here to try and do is to show the impact of the water interacting with the rocks here. Now, shutter speed, when anything is moving in the frame, has huge consequences in our photography. A short shutter speed, like we can see in the first example here, is frozen the water, or it's really quite jaggy. You can see all the detail. And if you think about it, we've got sharp, jaggy rocks and sharp, jaggy water. And what that means is we've got a photograph full of sharp, jaggy stuff. So it's going to be very aggressive in a way. It's going to feel sharp and jaggy. Now, we're very simple as humans, and we respond to sharp and jaggy by feeling prickly. It's how we just deal with the world in general. The first stage to change that was to take a 6-stop filter on my case K9 filter system here. So I've got the circular polarizer, which is taking a little bit of shine off the water, then the 6-stop dropped in. And what that allowed me to do is to take photographs at either 2 seconds or 4 seconds, just by moving the ISO around from 64 to low, change the amount of time that I was able to use here. So as soon as we start looking at 2 seconds and 4 seconds, we can see that the water begins to move, it begins to flow. You get this impression of movement, but it takes away a lot of the jagginess. It takes all those little sharp edges off. Now, not totally. We're still seeing quite a busy scene. So it's a natural thing to do is to progress onto a 10-stop ND filter. So that's what I have in my camera just now, is my case 10-stop filter. And I've got a minute exposure. The sun keeps coming in and out. And when I was making the exposure, the sun was out. The surf obviously reflects an awful lot more light. And I was limited to 1 second. I have a feeling that now we have a shady time that I should be able to take a longer exposure here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try like a 2.5 minute exposure. I've got my iWatch here with a timer of 3 minutes, so that should just remind me what to do. But when the sun goes in, you can see we've got less light, longer shutter speeds. So what we'll be able to do here is compare the 1 minute exposure with the 10 stop filter when the sun was out versus probably a 3 minute exposure unless the sun pops out again, which is behind Ann Kristin there. She's blocking it to keep it out of my way. Whenever time is changed in a photograph, when something is moving, the image will feel differently. Now, this is a superpower for landscape photographers. It's an extra superpower for expressive landscape photographers. Now you can see the sun has come out there. I'm going to check my watch. So that's just a minute I've done so far. So I've had about 50 seconds of less exposed water. I reckon I've got about another 50 seconds, so 100 seconds total with the sun out. So this is experimenting on the fly while I'm talking to you at the same time. But really, this is the key to expressive landscape photography when we have something moving in the frame. Being aware of the elements, realizing that the world is changing all the time, the light is changing all the time. Doing long exposures, you have to take into consideration what's happening with the light. So that's about a minute and 40 seconds so far. I think I'm going to stop that now. And I don't want to be too modest, but I think it's perfect. I've got a tiny bit of clipping in a cloud, but that doesn't really bother me. And this is the thing, you've got to be right on top of this, because once this surf blows out and you've clipped those highlights, there's nothing in them anymore. And really what we're trying to do is get flow and feel and atmosphere. So I think I'm done with the wide-angled scene here. It's been taken at 35 millimeters. Hopefully we've got some audio. It is very windy here, and hopefully the mic is picking up me and not so much of the wind. I notice when I zoom in to the screen here that there's a few areas in the frame where the interaction between the water and the rocks is creating quite jaggy abstracts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change lenses from my 24 to 70 to my Tamron 150 to 600. I'm going to try and zoom in on some of these areas and try and make some photographs that are much more abstract, much more detailed, and hopefully we can demonstrate some more learning points. As soon as we zoom in, one thing really happens is that the scene simplifies massively. Now, what I've been doing here is I've got the circular polarize on again, and we're using the 95mm case filters here. I've then got a 6-stopper in front of this. As soon as you zoom in, the stuff is moving more in the frame. You know, you're zoomed in, the water's flowing over the surface. So a shorter shutter speed, in this case between 3 and 5 seconds, depending on whether the sun is in or out or not, is enough. Go much longer than that and the whole thing's just going to deteriorate. What we're trying to do is get some semblance of streaking. Now, one thing that's totally worth mentioning here is time has two components. The first is the shutter speed, and the second, when you're dealing with the ocean, is timing. The time that when the wave actually comes up and drops down again. Now I'm using a short timer on this one, a 2-second timer, so when I press it, instead of using a timer release, which I always lose or drop or soak, and what you have to do is you need to kind of preempt when the wave is going to hit the high point before you actually press the shutter and allow the wave to come to the top and then recede. It's that streaking down that creates the most. And I'll show you a few of the different shots because sometimes you get it wrong. And that's one of the great things about this type of photography. It's very engaging. It's not just a case of waiting for the light. Every single wave is an opportunity to engage with the scene in a different way. Waves come up and they come down. The tide comes in and it comes out. There's a very dynamic sequence of time-related incidents going on here. I think what we really wanted to try and achieve today was just a short primer, a short introduction into how powerful time can be. What I may well do over the next week or so is, we're no doubt going to be taking lots more photographs with this, my new Tamron 150 to 600. There's some birds about, so I may photograph some of those. but certainly my intention is to try and get out with this and photograph the landscape. So I'll do a full review in the coming weeks of this 150 to 600 Tamron lens. This is really the first time I've had it out of the house. I haven't really photographed with it at all. So hopefully you found this little primer on time and timing to be of use to you. Remember one thing, time will change the atmosphere and the feel of your photograph when something is moving pretty much more than any other element. We can process them however we like, but one thing we can't change after the effect is the shutter speed. We can make it cooler or darker or more, we can do all sorts of processing and dodge and burn. We can't change the shutter speed, how the water is going to flow around these rocks. Tune in again on the coming weeks, and I look forward to sharing some more insights about expressive photography. And take care wherever you are. I hope you're well. Do the old thing with the shutter, with the subscribe and the thumbs up and all of that jazz. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Alistair Ben. You've been watching Expressive Photography. Until next time, take care everyone wherever you are. Bye for now.